I'm going to start with Stuart because I'll give Jay a bit of a rest, I think. Stuart, the investment by NT is clearly significant. I mean, you don't go around building a system like you're building at no cost. What were the factors that led to that investment being made on the island?
So we went through a process where our management committee in Chicago asked the business very broadly to come up with an idea that would provide a practical application of blockchain. And the idea was, rather than investing in settlement systems in a very generic way, the challenge was to find something that was very specific, that we could invest in, that would quickly turn into a solution. So that went round the corporation and various people contributed to that. And as we worked our way down, if you like, through a funnel of different options, and some of them were like TA systems globally and lots of different settlement ideas that came up, we started to land on the idea that alternative assets were less mature. So there was bound to be something in the alternative assets population. And as we looked at alternative assets, private equity then started to emerge as being a particular asset class where we were seeing generally that it was a very paper-based, quite an inefficient process in terms of both launching and transferring interests and all of the other things that go on in the private equity world. And so as we travelled down that funnel, the group obviously alighted on the fact that the Guernsey office was considered to be the centre of excellence for private equity business. So that was the first point. And then secondly, as we started to look at the jurisdiction and the other points around, well, how would this type of investment be supported, we needed to find a friendly client that would work with us, because we clearly needed to make sure that this was real and it wasn't going to be something that was just theoretical. And then secondly, that we had a jurisdiction that would be prepared to support anything that we needed in terms of both governmental but also regulatory support as well. And the idea was that we could find someone that would share the journey with us rather than just simply look at what we had come up with at the end. And so as we travelled through that, it was quite interesting that Guernsey started to emerge from a number of different points of view. And it wasn't really anything other than a very hard-nosed, objective assessment of what was available across the whole corporation, what the relevant asset class was, and then finding a jurisdiction that would support the programme. And as we worked through that, Guernsey was the jurisdiction that was left with ticks in all the boxes.
I think it's really interesting, because we sometimes put ourselves down, but clearly there's been a funnel process to actually make that investment here, and it is a significant one. So the decision wouldn't have been taken lightly. So I think it's really interesting that, for various reasons, we've got the private equity here, we've got the proper regulations, and we have the, Mark was talking about this morning, the ability to adapt, and I think that's quite important. And I think we need to play it up. I'll give John a question. During your presentation, you basically said, you've done all the in-house development. Why was that, and what are the real benefits of doing that you've actually found?
The simplest one is the ability to change. So if you're trying to seek, in a model like ours where you've got 400,000 quotes, you're getting really, really high volume of data, the ability to be able to react to it is what gives us our differentiation. If you buy a system, then not only do you get the same as everybody else, which can be good and bad, but you also get a constrained change process. So one of the things that we're very, very proud of is our ability to spot a segment in the market and move into it within an hour. Now, as an insurance company, that's really unusual. But to do that, you've got to be able to manage your rates properly, you've got to manage your data properly, and you've got to be able to change quickly. So most of our decisions were made around our desire to own the customer experience and to be able to change quickly. And that meant that packaged solutions weren't going to do it for us.
You talked a bit about skills, and I think you've got a lot of talent on the island now. How have you actually had to go out and get those skills? What have you had to do?
It takes a long time. So it takes a long time. I mean, something else we're very pleased about is that we don't lean on, although housing have been very supportive, we don't lean on the licensing system very much. So we grow. So we have a recruitment strategy which is either to recruit experts or graduates. So we very deliberately target really, really highly skilled time-served people or people that we are prepared to invest in. So we have a very significant training budget, £3,000 a head it usually works out at, which we spend every year, and we take a very long-term view to growing a team. We do take working culture input, give it its proper significance. So we try to create a sort of tech feel in the office, if you can get good staff retention, people like working there. You give them nice coffee and things that technical people like to have, music on and throwing aeroplanes at each other, etc. But because of that, you can create this sort of culture of growth. One of our values is nurturing growth.
It's amazing how noisy they actually are.
Oh yeah, I've moved upstairs now because I can't handle the noise. But no, it's really important to give those sort of technical and data people an environment where they can thrive.
Perfect. So final question to Jay, and then we'll chuck it out onto the floor, because I'm hoping there's questions out there, because I found those presentations really interesting. So, Jay, is the biggest barrier? You're doing something that's completely so far different from what the knitting that we normally do is. Biggest barrier. Then how are you growing that team on Ireland?
That's the barrier.
Yeah,
that is the barrier. I think I've got Mark and some of my team in the audience today, and you look at the obvious. People say, well, why are you based in Guernsey, and what's the reasons, what's the positive, what's the negatives, and all the obvious stuff. You talk about planes and blah blah. No, the biggest issue we have is recruitment. We're not at the stage where we've evolved into the size FCG are, and we're lucky because we've got a very small, highly skilled team led by Mark Holt, our CTO. But that is going to be our biggest concern, recruitment. I don't know how we're going to approach that. I've got to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. I'll chuck it out. Go on.
So it's very easy to be blinded.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to be blinded by technology and data, and it's all very techy, and you all work with technical people. There's probably a lot in the room, but at the heart of it, what Northern Trust is doing is providing confidence, what FCG is doing is providing persuasion, and what Tag Team is doing is providing reassurance, kind of crudely put. So I'm just wondering if you guys have psychology experts or kind of human experts in the team. How do you bring in those kind of behavioural understanding skills beyond the data and the technology?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's going to be the same.
Okay. So we do. So we treat our customer behaviour with a psychological perspective. So we get behavioural science as part of our change control process. So finding a pattern's one thing. Understanding what that pattern's telling you is something different. And so we treat, again, that customer experience is really, really important to us, and understanding customer behaviour and sentiment are those things that we've shown over time that you can derive commercial value from. So as an organisation, we're prepared to invest in those skills. The other thing that we also do, and it's kind of related, is we apply we apply that internally. So we provide access to psychologists to the team.
Our model's a bit different. So from the trust point of view, we tend to find that taking behavioural psychologists along to client meetings doesn't always go down particularly well. So our approach is very much that collaboration at the very outset. So our approach is really to go to the clients and say, what are your problems, and then to start devising solutions, and then to develop that collaboration as we go through. So it's not so much about trying to predict how they're going to behave, but it's actually going out and asking them at the very outset. And certainly with our project, the key was really working with a client that actually had a lot of data expertise within their own organisation, and actually finding a way of collaborating with them, and then also making sure that our local government and regulators were engaged as well. And that actually proved to be really interesting, because what we thought the answer was evolved over that process and started to change and flex. So slightly different approach for us.
I'm going to keep it very simple, because we do the same as FCG. The reason I can say that is there's a few things that we actually borrowed from them. But that's a compliment. We thought it was very forward thinking.
Thanks.
So how do you? So question with John. So how do you go about figuring out the relationships between various things? Do you just sit in a dark room and look at all the data and try and figure out why people do what they do, or how do you do that?
Well, there are two ways of doing it. One is you start with a hypothesis, which is your traditional data analytics. So you start with a hypothesis. I think 25-year-olds in London are more likely to buy personal accident cover, and you go and create an algorithm that can analyse the data and tell whether that's true. The more modern approach, which is using data science, it looks for correlation between data sets. So we start off with a proposition of 20 terabytes worth of storage. We tell a machine learning algorithm what the outcome is that we're looking for. So the outcome might be somebody buying a policy, somebody producing a quote, somebody phoning the call centre, whatever the outcome is that you're looking for, and you send the machine off to go find the things that matter to that outcome.
Right. And so we talk a lot about skills, and we berate ourselves, and we try and say the teachers be able to teach more. What do you actually? And I used the word Python this morning. There was a bit of a joke there. There was a reason why. There's a reason why I used Python. For anyone that knows it's a programming language, okay, right?
Very
okay.
important.
Yeah, it's a very important programming language. So, what should we be teaching in schools? What tools are you actually? What tools are you actually using?
Do you want to take this?
No, you go.
No, okay. So outside of the traditional coding skills, which are important, you need data architecture is really important, so understanding the structure of information. Modelling, statistical modelling, so Python and R, which are the two languages most used with machine learning. That's definitely going to be a growing part of the industry. But there's more than that. There's the business side, which is when we're educating young people about the landscape that we work. Every job in the future will have some kind of technical angle to it. So you've got to understand the interactions that you have with technology, and for us, we spend quite a lot of time educating our business in quite how our technology works. We need the people who are picking up the phone in the contact centre and handling customers to understand enough about the technology to deliver the service the customer wants, because the customer wants an online service, and they've only phoned us because they can't do that. So it has to be from everything. So it's all the analytics skills, it's all the architecture skills, as well as coding.
And I think Guernsey's perfectly set up for it. That's the kind of key at the moment. But it does start young. It has to start young.
Yeah. I sort of missed my strap line. I had a punch line in my speech that I forgot to say, which is, I'm going to say it now, which was that, as if you look at the word fintech, we're really, really good at the fin bit, and what we're not known for is the tech bit. But actually, on Ireland, there are lots of organisations who are really good at those things, and you can combine those together, you'll create a really, really valuable proposition.
Yeah, you mentioned you had the 5 digital interns, which Jennifer organised, and well done for doing that, Jennifer, because we took one person in, but we found it really good. What more do we need to do, all 3 of us, 4 of us, what more do we need to do to actually encourage our children to actually get involved in this stuff?
It's interesting, because I think as I just briefly said, I think it starts a lot younger than that.
Yeah.
The last week I've been going around schools, and I'm sure other people in this room did as well, looking at schools for my son, who's just about to do 11 plus. And the most important question that me and my wife and my son asked was about computer sciences.
Yeah.
What are they offering? And actually, forget all the other stuff, that's kind of given. And it was interesting to hear what the responses were, actually. And we are going to base our decision on that, because we think it's such an important thing, and I think it is the future of things.
Sure.
Well, I think there's a whole range of different things, and I guess having been in the industry myself since the 80s, we've been used to quite a structure and a structured hierarchy and decision-making program. And I think what we're finding is that actually the most effective way of breaking that down and actually getting some of the creative energy coming from all staff is by establishing a different way of thinking. And one of the examples that Northern Trust has developed is an innovation lab. So the idea is you just draw people that want to be involved, that are enthusiastic, and get them involved in brainstorming and thinking through problems and coming up with solutions. So that's been really helpful, and also setting up different networks and different ways of people working together. So it's not just working in a team and reporting to a boss, but actually there's all sorts of different opportunities and different councils that they can get involved in to help solve particular problems. So I think it's about flexibility and really being able to harness some of the energy that you have in your workforce in different ways that fit the particular problem.
I'd agree with almost all of that. I think what I would add to that is the sort of technical industry is a very young industry. So what I mean by that is it's populated by young people, and the young people as they come up into work, they if anyone's seen the Simon Sinek talk on millennials, I recommend you go watch that. But it talks about the people wanting to feel that they're contributing, wanting to understand the value that they add. And so what we've tried to do at FCG is to try and flatten the hierarchy a little and try and empower people to make decisions. So we have this sort of principle of collective responsibility. So when we assemble a team to do something, not only do they understand why they're doing it, but they're also empowered to make decisions about how best to do that within the constraints of data security or etc. But it tries to get people to see why that they're doing their job, which I think is something really, really important in technologists particularly, is because otherwise you'll kind of lose sight, and we don't want to create just a load of code monkeys. It's got to be more than that. We're solution providers, we're not coders.
Right, yeah, so getting the creativity in the team and getting the right level of understanding, okay, well, if I look at all that data and I look at that part over there, that tells me this, and that's got a correlation with this and over here, and getting them to understand that and then bring it forward to someone who can make the decision. We'll go and collect more data about that point and make a decision on it.
But you can't treat them as separate things, you've got to treat them together. So the reason why you do something, outside of when the regulator makes you do something, generally speaking, the reason why you do something is because you want to improve your numbers or lower your op cost or whatever it might be. To do that, you've got to be able to prove that you've done it. So you need the data as well as the marketeers and the technical people. You need to bring those teams together so that they're all acting as one, rather than coding team do something, pass it to the operational team who'll test it, pass it to the blah blah blah. We don't operate like that. We operate together.
Mike? Yeah, go on, Mike.
Three really cracking presentations. However, I think my question might lean more towards yourself, Stuart, and it's just around cost of entry. Your project's phenomenal. There's obviously quite a lot of weight and commitment behind this. But in the next few years, how do you see the cost of entry or barriers to entry potentially reducing in the way in which blockchain type technology is starting to be used more commonly? One that comes to mind, I don't know the ins and outs of that particular project, but not too long ago there was the issuance of the insurance-linked securities that was announced in Guernsey. Trying to calibrate what was involved in that project versus your project is quite interesting. I'm just wondering about these kind of costs of entry, what you think that might look like in the next year, 3 years.
I think it's a good question, and they're clearly going to come down. I think that there are some big service providers out there, and Microsoft is an example, that are developing technology which is broadly available to anyone that really wants to jump on board. They're still evolving and still developing, but I think that they're clearly going to come down, and they're going to come down quite quickly. So there is a first mover advantage here, but to be honest, I think 2 years would probably be the view that I would personally have as I start to see those cost of entry coming down. And I think we're going to start seeing some of the small to medium-sized players joining the market and beginning to develop their own solutions to these sorts of issues. So, yeah, it's going to get quite competitive.
I think it depends on where you're starting from. So, with the private equity, just Stuart was explaining before, there's a lot of friction in that market. There's a lot of paper in there. This isn't, you're trading BT stocks on a stock exchange and there's no friction. There's a lot of friction in that market, and that's why when I look forward, some of the spreads that you have to take if you're trying to sell the underlying investments, that's why they're so high. So it all depends where you're starting. So the cost of actually sorting out the legacy, the fact that you've got a load of spreadsheets is part of the problem. So if you're at the other end of the scale where you're, Jay, for example, and you've got a clean slate, it's probably quite easy. And if you go on to IBM's data center, you can spin up a Hyperledger instance, and they'll charge you per cycle through their system, and you pay for what you use. So that cost is quite low. What the issue is if you've kind of got a legacy data set that you need to deal with and digitise, that you're in a bad place, and you need to make that start. Compare it to where Jay is with green slate. Very different.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with that. We're kind of designing from the bottom level, and it allows us to be innovative, and I think that's the key to it. And it kind of goes back to what the whole panel's been saying. It's the approach to it. It's how we evaluate who we're going to be bringing in at the various stages, how we actually approach it as far as development. So yeah, it's good. It's a good place to be.
Yeah, and I think if you are starting with that clean slate, you end up with a very different mindset. So you end up with, you can put the security in at the start. You end up with a very different way of handling someone's data. It is their data. They're consenting that it can be used, and they say where it's going to go. And I think that mindset then leads you into a very different thing. Graham was talking about it before, and it was my debate with him that triggered his thinking about people will actually pay to actually have their data protected. I do think that will come. There are some high net worth individuals on the island. They will pay for actually for us to protect their data. And we need to think about that offering and actually look at it seriously. We already look after their funds. Data is now a currency. You can use it to buy services. It's definitely an asset, and people want it looked after as any asset.
What's interesting about private equity is that there's a cycle in a fund. So, I think your point is right about legacy systems, but what we have as an opportunity in private equity is that new funds are being launched every year because the old funds are coming to the end of their useful life. And generally 5-10 years will be the sort of life cycle that you go through. So it's a very helpful opportunity for anyone that's developing private equity is to jump on board with the new funds, and as they get launched, gradually they'll replace the old. So.
And the other thing I think is that you'll see people entering new markets, like John's in the retail insurance market. That's a really competitive market. There are going to be things that we left behind that we might be able to get back into with technology. So what we need to do is look at the products that we've historically run out of here and say, well, hang on, we can now compete in that space again because we're going to use this method, and we actually have a clean slate. So we don't have any legacy issues. We can start from fresh, and we can actually go at it in the proper way and how it should be done. And I think that's what if you what I want to do is sow seeds in your minds. Okay, what you should think about, and that's one area I do think. Look at what you do. Look at what you've done historically. Can you do it differently? We'll go one at the back. Sasha, go on.
My question leads a little bit from what Mike said. It feels like the remit of big data at the moment is largely only accessible to big companies or well-funded startups which are starting from scratch, because you need big data, you need lots of data points, you need IoT, you need artificial intelligence, you need the skills to actually be able to do that. So my question, I think, is how about the little guy on the street, the small, medium-sized business? How can it jump on the big data wagon? Because to me it seems completely actually inaccessible. A, because you don't have access properly to a lot of data by the nature of you being small. Second, you might be using outsourced online-based software, which is all great, but it's very difficult to make it actually speak to each other. Hence, FSG, you showed that matrix. It shows the complexity of what it means to operationally run a business. And so to me, it feels like at the moment, big data is really only for big boys or well-funded startups. So how would you get the small and medium-sized businesses jump on the data wagon?
So I think there is some truth in that. You need a level of investment. So for us, like I said, we've got an architecture that produces huge volumes of information. And if you're buying an off-the-shelf product, it's going to be hard for you to get the same degree of fidelity within that information. Data science itself is not expensive. Machine learning by itself is not expensive, because these are paid for typically as you consume them. So the issue is one of skill rather than of the cost of that. Even small businesses have got data, and all data carries correlation and models. I think the challenge would be is in the skill sets. If you look across the US or even parts of the UK now, data science as a sort of professional service, something you can buy and bring in, is something that's starting to gather pace. And we as a business, when we decided to sort of take the leap from statistical modelling into data science, the way we did that is we brought in external skill. We didn't have it in house. These guys you can bring in at £1,000 a day or whatever it costs. I see it just the same as outsourcing project management or outsourcing business analysis. Even an SME business will still look to partner with an organisation to provide those skills. This is the same. And so really, if that's where an SME needs to go or thinks that there's value in that, my advice would be to partner, because you won't afford to have them in-house and you won't retain them. Because data science, and one of the things that we've learned is, you take these graduates straight out of university, typically, so they come out of a statistical degree. If you get 2 years, you've done really well. You've done really well, because their world is just open. There's no barrier to where they can go and work, and every organisation needs them. So they're coming out of these mathematics degrees, and if you can hold on to them for 2 years, you've done really well.
So, John, could you maybe explain, because obviously one of the problems that Sasha's talking about there is actually the fact that small businesses don't have the data sets to do the analysis on. Do you maybe want to just talk through some of the data points that you actually buy in that you don't have in-house?
Well, we buy in, so because we're primarily an online organisation, we have analytics. We have two different flavours of analytics that we bring in. The problem with analytics typically is that it's aggregate. So it tells you 100 people that were on your website and 20 of them left at this page. There is a gap between the which 20. So what we do is we connect the two things together. So we buy that data in and we augment that with our own databases. Even when you're buying a cloud-based system or a third-party system, it's still your data. And so typically they will have a mechanism, albeit it's probably not going to be as broad as the data I've got at my disposal, but there will be information there that you can add to the stuff that you can buy. Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, they're not expensive pieces of software, which will tell you an awful lot about what's going on your website. If you can connect the persons who's on your website with the record that you hold for that person, that's when it starts to add real value. Otherwise, it's just people don't like the blue, people don't like the red. That's important, but it's not enough.
So okay. So what you're saying then is actually making sure you can actually triangulate the person.
You need
almost.
both. Well, you need both data sets. So you need, you can add very cheaply. So adding social media data, adding analytical data is not an expensive thing to do, but by itself it's not going to add very much value unless you've got the ability to couple it with your own information.
Yeah. Okay. Stuart, do you buy any data in or not?
We clearly do market data and all of that stuff, which is what you'd expect us to do. And I think my response to the question is I think there's probably two themes. One is probably looking at it from the other perspective, is there are disruptors out there at the moment who are not financial services groups. So from our perspective, we're beginning to see groups that aren't necessarily experts in valuing funds, but are very good at managing data. And they're beginning to compete in the same space that groups like Northern Trust are operating in today. So I think that's one competitive shift that we're beginning to see. And I think the other trend is this trend of outsource, where there are aspects of data management which are challenging and complex, and smaller groups with great ideas generally do better, in my view, where they can specialise in what they do best, but they can actually rely on someone else to provide the infrastructure that they need. So I think that's another trend that will probably continue, and it depends on the industry and what type of space that you compete in. But I see those two things operating at the same time.
I think it's interesting as well. It's all about cycles, and I think we're at that cycle now where we're kind of exploring and discovering. In our sense, the only data we bring in is satellite data. So when we look to do our tri-stereo mapping perspective, now that would have been impossible 2-3 years ago. But now it's even affordable for a startup, and I know it's a funded startup, but it is a startup, and we can do that very, very effectively.
And you can even do it around town. You've modelled the whole of town by the look of that.
Yeah.
There was a question at the back.
Just a very quick one. So all of this stuff, and we talk about cycles, changes not only the nature of work and the roles we all currently have, but also the nature of businesses themselves. So my question to the panel is, based on your current view and the potential direction of travel on this, what do you think the skills are for the current workforce that we'll need to have, as well as the mindset that we need to adopt to be able to take advantage of what this means generally, but also for Guernsey?
Well, I think from a mindset, for me, it's always been relatively straightforward. Things are always going to get smaller and more automated. It's just simple. That's literally it, and that's what's kind of driven us from kind of the beginning. But going back to your initial thing about the skill set, I think it comes back on itself. It's about educating. The amount of people that I know that, and I think a lot of people, if you put your hand up in this room today, what was your position or what was your stance on this 3-4 years ago? It'd be very different to where it is now. And I think that's kind of the point. You've got to educate yourselves. You've got to find like-minded people. You've got to inspire the people around you. We see it in the day-to-day. In fact, one of the people in the room is with one of our team members, and he had no idea about what it is we're achieving before he started maybe 2 months ago, and it's that whole educational piece. And now he's an absolute expert in so many areas of the logistical side of the data process. So, I think it's just about, people's attitudes have changed across the board, I think, hopefully.
I'd probably answer it with one word, which is flexibility. I think that individuals now that are in the workplace today, if they expect to just go into a job with a job description and stick with the job description and work their way up through a hierarchy in the traditional sense, I think they're very likely to be disappointed. I think that the key really is encouraging staff at whatever level and whatever role to expect the fact that their role will probably change multiple times over the next 3 to 5 years, and actually encouraging that flow and that shift is a really important part of what we now need to look for from our current workforce. Because I think in the next 5 years, my job will probably change and Nick's job will probably change. There will be fairly dramatic turnover of existing traditional roles. And I think if people are nervous and are frightened by that, whilst that's understandable, I think if we can replace that with some real excitement about what the new opportunities may look like, then I think that's going to position firms and businesses to develop and grow with the rate of change.
For us, I think every role will have a technical angle. I think a lot of it will because of automation or robotics. We as a business, if we look 5 years ago, we would sit around as Exco discussing threats to the organisation. We talk about third-party insurers stealing our rates or our ideas or our new proposition. When we sit around Exco now and we discuss threats to the business, our threats are not insurance related. Our threats are technology related. Why are we arrogant enough to think that the Googles and the Microsofts of this world with more data and more money and better modelling skills aren't going to be able to do insurance better than us? That's where we spend our time thinking. And actually, as a business, my intro, I talked about us being a insurance and technology group. In the future, those words will flip round, and technology will become more part of what we do than the insurance bit. And I think actually that will happen to most businesses.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I reflect back on a conversation I had with one of my friends who worked at Amazon about 4 or 5 years ago. The reason why they built their marketplace is they want to know what sells. Yeah, one day he phoned me up and said, "I want to know about this business on Guernsey, what they're doing and why they're doing it." And it's like, oh, that's interesting. So you've already started it. They are looking to compete by knowing what's going on, what sells, at what price, and why. And then they can come into a market that's profitable, and they can use their capital, they can deploy it. And when you're dealing with financial services, all we're doing is deployment of capital. The other observation is, I think my degree taught me one thing: self-learning. Yeah, I used to get, there's a manual, go and learn C. There's another one, go and learn small talk. There's another one. Self-learning is so important, and it's that we need to encourage. There's guys in the room that know I will chuck them, here's a book. There's a reason why I chuck them a book and tell them to read it. It's because I think it's got value. And that self-learning element is so important, I think, because I can't tell you which is going to play out. Is it Python? Is it R? I can't tell you which one to learn. But I know you need to learn it. And if you don't have that passion to learn it yourself, then you won't succeed, because the pace of change and what you can actually do, I was reading something over the weekend, and there's medical doctors writing in R tools and procedures, and they're putting them out there, and you can pick them up, you can read them, These guys didn't do a computer science degree. They just know the value of the data they've been able to amass and how to analyse it. You know, and it's going to hit everyone. And so being able to actually pick up something, teach it yourself, I think that's the fundamental thing that we should, alongside the creativity part, that's what we should be teaching our kids.
Totally.
So. How much we got? Time for one more.
This is just a slightly more general question to the panel. And one thing that worried me out of this, Nick, was your introduction where you said these are 2 hidden gems. Why aren't we publicising this more, and how do we get government to publicise this more and get Guernsey on the map?
Yeah, but I don't know. When we did 2 years ago, we did the fintech stuff. We tried to promote it more. We hide our light under a bushel so much, it's just unbelievable. And we should stop doing it, because we actually do some stuff really well. You know, I put out something that I was telling Stuart before, on the blockchain, onto our network. There is no one else publishing within the PwC network about blockchain in the way that we are from here. That tells us something, yeah? And we need to stop berating ourselves for it. I completely agree. You know, what Jay's doing is fantastic. It is a hidden gem. You know,
in fairness, we did ask for it to be hidden.
but I do really think that we actually do. You know, it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible trait to have. But I think we've got a case of it. We beat ourselves up about stuff when we're actually doing some really quite interesting stuff.
But I do think the conversation is changing, though. I have to say, I've noticed that over the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
I think the groups are starting to come together, and you're starting to see a conversation, and it is as a result of people like Jennifer and other people connecting people within Guernsey. That's the beauty of Guernsey. It's one massive community. You know, you'll know 50 people in London, you'll know 1,000 in Guernsey, and you just see that overlapping growing, certainly over the last 2 years I have. And you are starting to, you know, you don't know that I've been talking to people within your business, but it is happening.
Stealing our ideas. It's good to know that.
It's moved on now. I think it's a PR opportunity, isn't it? I think we need to think about that in all the sorts of different levels, but there is a PR opportunity, definitely.
You need the businesses to be them promoting it themselves.
Yeah.
So you know, we have been doing some very, very cool things with technology for the gain of our insurance company. It's only this year that we sort of had the bright idea that actually, do you know what, we're really good at this and we could do this for other people, and very clearly that we can do it from other people from here. So I don't have to fly everywhere to go serve an insurance platform to an insurer in Poland, but yeah, I can deliver the same capabilities to that insurer. So once the model is proven, I think then the businesses need to see the value in doing it, rather than describing ourselves as an insurance company. We would never have even entertained the idea of supplying our technical platform to a third-party insurer. Yet when you describe us as a insurance and technology group, well, actually technology is now important as a revenue in its own right. How can we exploit that? And I think that when businesses do that, so if your blockchain as a mechanism is lifted and deployed somewhere else, then that's when Guernsey gets a name for being innovative. Being innovative in our internal environment is great, and we can all pat ourselves on the back about it. But how Guernsey will get on the map will be when it's distributed out.
I mean, one of the ones that we have looked at, and the islands did this, WorldPay came over here. There is no reason why we can't be doing even more of that.
But creating it ourselves.
Oh, creating it ourselves, yeah. I mean, WorldPay was created here, it just got taken off when it got so big.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, that's it. I think we've got lunch now, yeah? Lunch is served. Right. Perfect.